chaos is a ladder. Pay attention, folks. So, um, what else do we have here? Uh, so that brings me to my next point. So another trend that we have that pops up a lot these days is that people think that these are all organic protests. You know, the summer of love. Oftentimes, if you peruse social media from reputable, investigative, independent journalists, you'll see videos of, it happened all during COVID and the riots during 2020. You'll see stacks of neatly organized, wrapped, professional looking bricks and cinder blocks just posted right outside some government building, or right outside, the square, around the corner from the square where the rally and the protest is going on. And sure, before the rally even starts. And then all of a sudden, the next day, there's a protest there and people are throwing bricks. What a coincidence. Well, nowadays, I've seen videos already for the protests happening in LA where there have been some of those bricks, some of those cinder blocks, but there's also there's new strategies now for these anarchist liberals where they're taking hammers and chisels and breaking apart stone structures in the city, on the side of a building, on the sidewalk, on a pillar that's sticking out of the ground, breaking it into small pieces so they can take those stones and throw them and cause damage and destruction. And you're sitting here and telling me that Trump is the problem? You think that has anything to do with ICE? It's not even Spanish, Mexican, or immigrant. It's not even them doing it. It's these deranged liberals. And what I'm trying to get at is that a lot of them are paid agitators. And if they're not paid, this is just their social justice campaign. But their operation is funded.
Just found a really great deep dive here from the Data Republican on X. So who is behind all these crazy riots in LA and that will be across the nation? Just like, remember, in the Summer of Love with BLM, remember who's organizing all that stuff? With this specifically is being funded by an individual by the name of Neville Singham, who actually made his money by pushing communist Chinese propaganda, became a billionaire doing it. He's now funding, and the guy behind all of these protests was also behind and tied to the protests at Columbia University, pushing all of that BS, if you don't remember. And then also, too, if you actually look at the social organization that's putting out these flyers, it's the Party for Socialism and Liberation, which is, and I kid you not, the actual Communist Party. So they're using Hispanics, they're using illegal immigrants, they're trying to hype people up thinking that they care, but they don't care. They would stop illegal immigration. Obama deported people. Why all of a sudden now? It's political.
Facts. And, like I said, guys, so it's absolutely crazy that this is what's going on out there. And for some reason, these idiot Democrats, whether they're on social media or on CNN or something like that, all they can say, their TDS is full blown at this point. All they can do is continue repeating the same tired bullshit about Nazis and Gestapo. It's exhausting, is what it is. It's exhausting dealing with these people. This guy, let's see what this guy has to say, right? Hitler had the Gestapo. Germany had the Nazi Party. Trump has ICE. America has MAGA. Same shit, different timelines. Tell me you're a retard without telling me. Man, reopen the asylums. You know what I mean? I don't know what to do with these people. I mean, we had an entire election where Democrats did everything they could to call everybody and their mother a Nazi or some variation of that. It clearly didn't work. almost 88%, I believe, of the counties in the country moved to the right. Trump won every swing state. Same story, right? And here, and this is their all they have. And at some point, the people have to realize this is all they have. If people rejected that narrative and voted for Trump, the worst person ever to be elected, according to them, and yet they still keep doing this and saying stuff like this, doesn't that tell you that that's their only game? That's all they can do. They can't tell you what they can offer you. They can't tell you the truth. They can't tell you why their way of doing things is actually good. They could just lie about it. They can't respond to direct criticisms when people bring up opposing facts. All they can do is lie, gaslight, and sell fear. That's it. Even when the fear that they're selling has been rejected, they just keep doing the same thing. So, I mean, if you fall for it, then you're an idiot. Straight up. What else? A message for ICE agents. Nazis were also just following orders. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Sure thing, buddy.
Shut up, bitch!
I mean, Nazis. These are illegal immigrants, criminals. I'm sure you probably, if you haven't been paying close attention, you wouldn't know that the reason that ICE was in California, specifically this most recent time, was because they were investigating and rounding up people for like human trafficking operations, these illegal immigrants. This is who they were there for. And then they go and they do their job of grabbing the criminals and deporting them. And liberals are like, oh my God, they threw them in the car and he banged his head on the ceiling. Like, grow the fuck up. Seriously. These are criminals. And even if they weren't, these are people that were just dumped into the country, right? You want to know why wages aren't as high as they could be, why the country's not flourishing, why, there's all this division. How about you have a country, a city, state that has a shared ideology, that believes in American values, that doesn't want to burn down the city, that doesn't want to wave other countries' flags and claim that that part of the city or the state or whatever belongs to them. If you didn't have that, perhaps we'd be able to come to more agreements about policies. You ever think about that? No, because you idiots are so concerned with the media narrative about America was born on immigrants and America, it's just like, it's mentally exhausting that people can't think for themselves. And then they'll be the ones like, oh, if you voted for Trump, it's because you're in a cult. Meanwhile, every single word that comes out of their mouth involves zero critical thinking, zero logic and reasoning. It's just parroted narratives from this network or this influencer or the other. It's exhausting. It's embarrassing. Here we are again. We have another example of the degradation of society and another narrative that I'm sure will be spun into some freedom fighting cause or glossed over by the race baiting, black influencers that try to apologize for every crime that black people do commit in the country and blame white people, conservatives, Trump, whatever, for. It's amazing. This, in the summer of love, when black people were, it wasn't just black people, when blacks were looting and breaking windows and running out with stuff, all the black politicians and social media narrative pumpers, right? All the people that were, part of the whole race baiting culture on social media who had a platform or politicians, they were all saying the same thing. They're like, well, this is because of the years of atrocities that have been done to black people and they're just getting out their frustration. Tell me why the illegal immigration issue has a goddamn thing to do with black people in fucking Los Angeles running up in stores and stealing Jordans.
You guys, they're looting. Can I get a new pair of shoes too? How you doing? I'm not doing shit. Yo, grab me a shirt. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Man, let me just get a shirt up in here, dog.
It's infuriating. The inmates have officially taken over the asylum. And, you're always going to have detractors and stuff like that in any population of any people. And that's why I say the worst part of this to me is the everyday person who goes along with it. You are actually the ones who looked the other way, as this retard said over here about the Nazis, right? What did he say? Nazis were also just following orders, right? Well, guess what? How about the people, the German citizens, who may have not been 100% comfortable, some of them, with what was going on, but said and did nothing? I would assume that these liberals would have a problem with that. Well, you didn't do anything, and silence is violence, and all that stuff, right? Okay. Well, you're sitting here standing by while people are exploiting this. I would be offended if I was actually an immigrant from a Spanish-speaking country who followed the orders or followed the rules of immigration. Not only would I be offended, I mean, there's many people who voted for Trump in that exact situation. They are offended by it. But here, I'll do you one better. If I was an illegal immigrant from a Spanish-speaking country, or anyone, right? But specifically for this example, from a Spanish-speaking country, if I was an illegal immigrant, but I wanted to follow the American, I wanted to be American. I wanted to get my citizenship. I wasn't in a society, I wasn't in favor of destroying society. I came to America for a better life for me and for my kids. If I was one of those people, I would be infuriated. More so than me personally, more so than I am. I'd be infuriated by this. What are these people in this video? What do they have to do with the illegal immigration issue or the immigration issue? These are black, some of them maybe, but what are the black kids in here? What does this have to do with them? Or, because when it was George Floyd, it had to do with them. Well, what does this have to do with them? Because I'll tell you what, the looting that happened during 2020, it didn't have shit to do with George Floyd or any of that. Just like it doesn't have shit to do with them now. This is just how people operate. When there's some sort of event, there's been a culture that's been created in this country where people think the appropriate response is looting and damaging and stealing. And the Democrats, because they pander to black people, to Spanish, to minorities in general, because they pander to them for their vote so they can remain in power, they allow it to happen. That's it. You want to know the answer to why it's going on? That's why. And let's see what else they're doing. We'll just keep the sound off and we'll just look at this video and let it play, but it just continues. And oh my God, man. Like, do you have no self-respect? No respect for your family, for your, how you, the worst part of this video, other than that they're doing it, is that they're doing it so casually. They're just walking in and out with boxes and people are filming and, back in the day, if somebody was going to commit a crime, the last thing they would do is film it. These idiots are taking selfies as they're walking out of the store. Where are the cops? Where are the politicians to tell people to stop doing this? What the fuck is wrong with people? I'll tell you what. I'm very hesitant to openly advocate for banning masks in public, although they should be. I'm hesitant to be a person that's advocating for that because I'm wise enough to be able to see that, with AI coming and, facial recognition software, that will be exploited. We'll ban masks in public so that these idiots don't exploit the rules. And then well, now that everybody's face is exposed and there's facial recognition software and AI technology like they have in China, you'd all be fucked. And, that's the part. That's why I say the people are the ones that bother me the most because as someone who, I spoke earlier about if you want to have an organized society and you have to have rules and you have to have guidelines. If you have to have order, because there's no safety, there's no freedom, there's no prosperity, there's none of that without a safe, organized society, right? But if you want to have that, right? If you're going to have that, I recognize that if you're the people who are running that society, you would probably view the fact that there's all this software that's coming out and with social media, other countries trying to infiltrate and sow division in our country, people within the country sowing division and maybe plotting and trying to do all types of nefarious activities, that there's it's you are the ones in charge of this country and everybody's safety, and it would be easier to do so if you had more power and control. I can understand that perspective. Let's for instance assume it was a really perfectly good, moral, just person that had control, had that type of power to be able to, like imagine it were you and you look at yourself as a good person and you're like, well, I would never exploit that power to hurt anybody. I would just want to use that power to make sure that nobody else could commit crimes that hurt other people. Yeah, it sounds great. But first of all, you don't know how you would act once you had that power, right? Maybe you would act like that most of the time. And then if somebody did something you didn't like, even though they didn't really do anything wrong, they did something you didn't like, all of a sudden you'd want to use that power for that. Well, that's what happens with humans. So while I can see the perspective of, we want to protect everybody and, there's a lot of risk and potential harm out there. And the best way to do it with all this new technology is to be able to identify people quickly using facial recognition software, by using AI to track people's movements and do all these things, right? If these people didn't have masks on, bing, bang, boom, AI would be able to tell you who was who, and they would be arrested or charged or sued or whatever immediately. Sure, that's great in a situation when people are doing dumb shit like this and deserve to be punished. But then maybe you say something that's, maybe you're against the Ukraine war or something. And or maybe you're walking down the street and somebody films you and you're having a conversation about a topic, but it's a private conversation, but you're saying things that somebody overheard or whatever. Well, facial recognition software, bang, go right up in that person. Like, be very careful the power you give to your government. That is a fact, and we have to remain cognizant of that. But we also can't just allow this. And so if the people held each other accountable, then we wouldn't need to rely on the government to do everything. That's what being an adult is. You don't wait for the government to you don't rely on daddy government. That's communist, right? That's what that is. You want a mother, you want a daddy state. Right? We need people to hold each other accountable and condemn behavior like this, so we don't need to embolden the federal government to have mandates where you can't cover your face in public or something. Although, to be honest, I don't think you should be allowed to, just in general. Maybe to some degree, but you should have to have some sort of justification. To my recollection, that used to be the case. I remember the only times people were allowed to wear masks was Halloween. Now, everything doesn't always have to be a full-on law. But the problem is, Democrats specifically will cry foul anytime people will exploit, the ability of a cop to come up to you and ask you why you're wearing a mask. Oh my God, he's targeting me. And then they'll start a whole racism campaign, and then people will have to bow down to the fucking woke mob because of race politics. Meanwhile, well, now you get this, and then the only answer is to turn to the government and say ban masks in public. You see? You see how the people get manipulated into supporting the things that they themselves don't want to happen, and then because they allow society to degrade to such a degree, They have to. You know? Be very careful to what you agree to that's sold to you as a form of protection. That's what gangs and mafias do. They're gonna protect you, and then they own you. But they're gonna keep you safe, and they will. But then when they tell you to fork over this or that or whatever, you better listen. And not only should you listen because there might be a punishment coming to you, but you should listen because they're protecting you. All they got to do is stop protecting you and you'd be in trouble. You know, God forbid something would happen to you. You know what I mean? But like I said, people aren't ready for those conversations. They're immature. And what else do we have here? Immaturity. Maybe I'll end with this. Immaturity is one thing, but I don't know if you guys remember, but during the lead up to the election, when a lot of these Democrats were out here protesting and saying Trump was Nazi and all this stuff, remember we had the, what was it, the 4B movement, people shaving their heads. These people are sick. They're deranged, they're sick, they're not well. And you know, go get help if you're not well, by all means. But as Chris Rock famously said, can't you just be crazy? You know what I mean? Whatever happened to crazy? People can't just be crazy no more. Apparently they can.
Stupid. You stupid.
I rest my case.